Ya Alimadet. I hope you are all keeping well and safe. My name is Aisha Mohammed, and I will be your host for this evening. Now, before I share the program for tonight, here are some highlights of the board activities this week. Tomorrow, we begin with the Golden Club at 12:30 p.m., consisting of faith and well-being talks. In this session, we will be joined by lawyer and author Dr. Mohammed M. Keshevji, who will deliver a talk entitled Ismaili Settlement in South Africa, 1894 to 1994, from the advent of Mahatma Gandhi to the release of Nelson Mandela. Details of the Zoom session are in this week's Al-Sahar. After hugely successful first few modules, FinLit for Kids has its final module tomorrow, Sunday, 25th April. The Aga Khan Economic Planning Board has collaborated with award-winning organisation City Pay It Forward to bring you FinLit for Kids, a 5-part online series teaching children about finances. Modules 1 to 3 have been completed, and Module 4, tomorrow, Sunday, 25th April, is all about budgeting. In the afternoon, on Sunday, 25th April, at 1 p.m, join the Aga Khan Education Board for an interactive workshop and learn how to impart the joys of reading to your little ones, as well as teaching them about expressing their emotions in a healthy way. This session will focus on echo reading, an easy-to-use strategy designed to help early readers gain fluency, expression, and build their confidence in their reading abilities. This is ideal for parents and/or carers of 3 to 5-year-olds. The session will take place at 1 p.m. Please register via the Ismaili app as spaces are limited. On Monday, 26th April at 8:30 p.m, join the Aga Khan Health Board for Mindful Mondays. Get away from your busy schedules and take the time to notice what is going on around you. Mindfulness is the process of purposely bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment without judgment. Are you in your final year or recently graduated and thinking of your career prospects? If so, join the Aga Khan Education Board and Bright Network for this information session on internships, CV writing, networking, and career development. This practical advice will help you find that dream job. This session will be held on Wednesday, 28th April at 6 p.m. Register via the Ismaili app. On Wednesday, 28th April at 8 p.m, the Sisterhood brings you the power of forgiveness and letting go. Do you want to release the suffering you are holding? Join the Women's Activities portfolio for this interactive session, where we will discover what true forgiveness is, how it enables us to let go and touch into freedom, in a strength, in a peace, and in a joy. This promises to be an inspiring, uplifting session where you will also have the time to connect and chat with other women. Save your spot now by visiting iiuk.org/sisterhood. And now, on to tonight's programme, which is on the theme of thinking ahead. Tonight's Thinking Ahead session is called Thinking Ahead, One Jamaat. Karina Govindji and Amin Mauji, former president of Ismaili Council for UK, discuss the history behind the idea of one Jamaat and the importance of strengthening the attributes of belonging, behavior, and belief, especially during the times when the Jamaat cannot come together. Following this informative talk, we will be sharing a session on laughter yoga by the Aga Khan Health Board and Nasim Nanji. Laughing yoga is a modern exercise involving prolonged voluntary laughter. When you start laughing, your chemistry changes, your physiology changes, your chances to experience happiness are much greater. Join us and prepare your body and mind for happiness. I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Continue to stay safe and well. Ya Ali Madad.
Yali, I mean, it's lovely to connect with you. And today we're going to be talking about One Jamaat. And as I reflect, I was thinking about an experience, I think it was July 2009, when we were in the council chambers, and it was scattered in post-it notes as we worked through the council priorities. And I recall, I think, that One Jamaat emerged from that exercise as a key theme and a priority from your presidency. So, I mean, maybe you can tell us, what does One Jamaat mean and where did it originate?
Thank you, Yali Madad, everyone. And let me say, Karina, it's a great pleasure to reconnect with you once again and to dwell back into some of those memories back in 2009, I think it was. You know, in some ways, the time when we were appointed to the council, 2009, seems just like yesterday. And yet in the context of what we're going through today, this pandemic, it seems like it was a totally different world. And you've reminded me that, you know, when we were appointed, amongst the very first steps that we took were to identify what should be the main priorities for our Jamaat in the UK jurisdiction. That includes, you know, parts of Europe, UK, and so on. That was 2009, immediately after the biggest economic shock of our time, the 2008 financial crisis. You will recall that we identified 5 priorities. And the very first of those was what we called One Jamaat. And the aim was actually very simple. It was to strengthen community cohesion, social cohesion in the Jamaat, if you like, at that moment after the crisis. And of course, the need to strengthen cohesion in the Jamaat was not something that was new to us in our history. But I think in 2009, we felt and we recognized that we were seeing increasing inequality in our Jamaat, a creeping increase in inequality. We were seeing diverse traditions, some newly arrived, perhaps not meshing together in a natural way, didn't really have any shared histories with other sections of the community. And the external influences on all of us, but particularly on our youth, meant that our culture was at risk of getting diluted. And I think against all of that backdrop, we took the decision, 2009, to refocus our efforts on 5 key things, on 5 key priorities. And at the top of that list was One Jamaat, strengthening community cohesion. It was a pillar led by Zul Hashim, did some fantastic work, one of the hardest working council members. And you know, looking back on it, I think that work has served us really well. It was an important piece of work for us. And of course, you were a very important part of that team. And it'll be interesting to get your perspective on looking back at that time.
Well, you're absolutely right. The context has changed so much since then, but yet it's so relevant. You know, I think one of the things that would be good for us to explore together is, why is it still so relevant if we think about today's backdrop? What are your thoughts?
Well, why is this important given today's backdrop? Look, you know, Maulana Nazir Imam and in fact, Sultan Mahmud Shah before him has always been very, very clear on emphasizing the importance of unity, solidarity in our Jamaat. But I was also very struck when I first started to have to think about this by some of the science behind this. And, I talk about a very famous Arab social scientist, Ibn Khaldun, who lived in the end of the 14th century, early 15th century. Ibn Khaldun studied many tribes and clans. And it was quite interesting looking at his work because he found that tribes that had very strong solidarity, tribes that were united, were much more successful and it actually became super tribes. There were tribes that had a lot of influence, they had power, they were economically strong, they punched well above their weight. And these were communities which developed a culture that was infused with meaning, with some kind of purpose, with group consciousness. And he called this the spirit of kinship. The word that he used was asabiya. And I was very taken by this notion of asabiya. And I think that, with our Imam's guidance, we have this asabiya as Ismailis. And I think if we follow that guidance, if we continue to follow that guidance, we will build the resilience that this crisis demands of us.
You're so right, Amin. And actually, this idea of being one and united, the notion of standing up for justice and equality and against oppression, these is so something that all societies aspire to, and it's so relevant, obviously, in today's context.
Yes.
And we know that in the Quran, actually, it's a repeated theme that we should, encourage us to fight against oppression. And I think it's helpful just for us to reflect for a few moments about the situation that we are in currently, with the race equality issues really dominating so many parts of the world. And I think it's really highlighted, racism exists. It exists beyond borders, and it persists through countries, through societies. And, I have been spending, because of my work, a lot of time with impacted communities over the last couple of weeks. And I have to say, it's that really very saddening how deep this pain goes, and that, of course, there's no respect for geographical boundaries with this pain. And, in the work that I do, if I think from a business point of view, this case for diversity, it's growing stronger and stronger every day. And maybe it's helpful if I just pause and reflect on what I mean by diversity, because I'm referring here maybe to the existence of difference from an individual perspective. So, diversity being that existence of individual difference. So that can be a number of dimensions, whether that be gender, whether that be race, whether that be disability. And so much of the work that we see is that this diversity, this difference, is a driver of innovation and creativity. And I think we can probably think about our own experiences. If we've been, in a team where there is difference, where there is that diversity, the richness that those discussions have yield better outcomes. And of course, in business, actually, there's evidence to show that yields more profitability as well. And one of the things I've been thinking about is, this idea of when we think about our Jamaat, bringing that difference to the front. And we know it's important even from a product design perspective. The more diversity in product design, the better that product is for the users that it's serving. And I don't know if you're familiar, there's some research that's come out more recently. There's an author called Caroline Perez. And Caroline talks about a number of different research studies and the impact of not having all users at the table. And the one that actually I'm recalling is to do with women and safety incidents. So actually, I don't know if you know, but women are 47% more likely to be seriously injured in a car crash. And that's just because actually the car safety mechanisms are not designed with women in mind. So, over time, the dummies that are used in, car crash tests are made of average males. And of course, women are not average males. And so, these are, real safety incidents, but they highlight that we do need to have all perspectives at the table if we're going to have great outcomes. So Jamaat, I think, us thinking about how we can bring those diverse perspectives to the table. How do we make sure everyone's voice is heard, so that our strategy and programs are actually reflecting the entire Jamaat, the entire one Jamaat, and not just one particular segment of the Jamaat. No, so maybe I mean, I can ask you, what do you think is best practice when we think about cultivating this feeling of one Jamaat and inclusion?
So there's a question I think we all need to think about together. Your point about what is best practice, how do we sustain a community, a Jamaat, where every individual can see themselves as an equal stakeholder. Look, my observation in life is that every human being longs to belong. Everybody longs to belong to something. That's our default position. It's the human condition. But there are reasons why people feel excluded. And I can think of 2 or 3 key reasons why people feel excluded when I look at our own Jamaat. Firstly, we as institutions may be depriving them of the opportunity to engage. Now, you and I have been very fortunate. We've had a chance to serve in Jamati institutions. We've had a chance to do seva. We have lived in places where Jamaat Khana is easily accessible for us. Not everybody gets those opportunities. And not everybody gets a chance to serve. Not everybody gets a chance to get appointed in committees and so on. And if we allow that to happen too long, and particularly if it happens over generations, then we start to exclude people, and that needs to be watched. The second reason why I think people feel excluded sometimes is what I call behavior and values. Experience tells us that if communities don't call out bad behavior, or they tolerate bad behavior, or they don't recognize and give credit for good behavior, that turns some people off, and then they exclude themselves. And then the third factor I would mention is beliefs. The thing which is absolutely at the heart, at the core, at the center of our community is our faith. And we have to make sure that we keep faith very relevant in people's lives. And here I think there is a generational thing. I always say that people will consider themselves an Ismaili if they sign up to these 3 things. If they feel that they belong, if they feel that the behaviors are behaviors that they're proud to be associated with, and if they share the same set of beliefs. Now, between us girls, I think 2 out of those 3 sometimes is all it needs to qualify as an Ismaili. But that I think is where we need to think about the future. And it'll be interesting here, I think, again, as a generational thing, to get your perspective, or what you think it'll feel like for all of us to be acting as one Jamaat if we look ahead a little bit.
Thanks, Amin. And I can't agree more with this sense of belonging, creating this deep sense of belonging. And, to get there is not easy. And that requires, individual efforts to reach there, taking personal responsibility for our own behavior. And actually, what I've learned is really educating ourselves, not making assumptions about experiences of others. And I think that's a really important first step. And that's certainly emerging in the current discussions about a key way to engage is to just, educate. And I actually remember, when I first got into this area, I had an encounter with someone who had dwarfism. And actually it was an amazing experience. So she described actually herself as a little person, again, a term that I wasn't familiar with. And then she proceeded to tell me about her daily life, about just going to work and the barriers that she faced at every stage. And I'm talking about just, the door handles are too high for her to reach. She can't go to the toilet because the toilet seat is too high. Just innumerable barriers. And quite honestly, I had not reflected on these or even thought about them. And that's because of my privilege of being able-bodied. So, we can all find opportunities to educate ourselves, to think about, how we can reflect the lives of others. So I think sort of seeking to, understand that experience of others is going to help us significantly on this journey.
I mean, you bring quite a unique blend of experiences because you've obviously served in Jamati institutions, you've served in other organizations, but you've also been at the heart of diversity and inclusion in some of the largest business organizations that we have. I mean, what do you see as some of the other challenges that people or companies face in sustaining inclusivity?
It's hard. Sustaining inclusivity is really hard. And that's because we don't have inclusive systems and processes embedded. And what that means is then for us to be inclusive, we rely on individuals to do the right thing, to behave in the right way. And individuals are humans. And by that, we are all prone to unconscious bias. And that's really the key challenge. You know, this is deeply embedded historical bias. And that leads us, therefore, to make decisions that are not inclusive. And maybe I can give an example of what I mean by a type of bias. So one very key bias is this idea of an in-group versus an out-group. We like people who are like us. We're comfortable with people who are like us. And as a result, we actually stereotype people who are not like us. We fear them and we put them in the other category. And that's, of course, you know, at the heart often of racism. But if you think about that in-group versus out-group, it is deeply embedded. Actually, there's research to show that babies at just a few months old will smile more at someone who comes into the room who's the same race or gender as their main carer, which means we're naturally drawn to people who are like us. You know, we feel very comfortable with that. And any difference then causes discomfort. So I think, you know, us thinking about how we raise our own self-awareness of this discomfort, learn to live with that discomfort. And, you know, think about, you know, from a faith community, the fact that, you know, equality and fairness are so deeply embedded in our culture. So drawing on those in order to strive for our ideal, I think is really important. And, you know, my best suggestion is that we do start at home. You know, if we think about our own children and actually even our parents, how are we having conversations with them? How are we helping them to embrace difference, to challenge some of those biases, whether that be about race, whether that be, you know, about gender stereotypes that they might see in the home. You know, as, you know, parents, we are our children's greatest teachers. In fact, many parents are actually becoming their children's teachers during this lockdown period. So, you know, they look to us to make sure that the words we're saying and the behaviors that we are showing are, you know, on par, and that will influence them. And I think, I mean, we're also influenced by role models. You know, we see what we aspire to be. And so if we don't see ourselves reflected, for example, in leadership positions, unconsciously, we think that's not possible for us. And that can perpetuate, you know, the stereotypes about what it takes to be successful. And I know that in our own leadership, we're not yet reflective of the Jamaat that we are serving. So, you know, we do need to think about better balance. And by that, I don't mean just gender. You know, we need to think about Jamati different traditions, about age, about all kinds of dimensions. I mean, gender equality, you know, is a global challenge. You know, there's research to say it's going to be another 100 years before we get there in the world. And I think as a Jamaat, we want to do much better than that. We want to be much more progressive. And, you know, it's voluntary, so that makes it harder to do. It takes a lot of time and effort, and it is a long journey. But it's really heartening to hear President Saib today talk about the fact that, you know, he's going on this journey. And my experience is that when leadership take this seriously, it really does help, you know, everyone to be successful. That's not to say that we can't all play our own part. And, you know, those of us that are involved in Seva, and you referred to this, you know, I mean, how do we sort of find ways to make sure that our teams are not just made up of people like us? You know, how do we really pause at the point that we are bringing people together and say, how do I bring diverse perspectives across the table? These are little things that we can do to make sure that actually we go past that level of comfort to really seek different perspectives. And maybe I can just sort of reflect on a couple of other challenges beyond these individual differences that I do think we have from a diversity perspective in our Jamaat. So one that comes to mind is, you know, our own, you know, religious practices. These are so important to us. They're so embedded in our, you know, everything that we do. And the reality is we have to embrace different religious perspectives, and we need to embrace those different rituals. And that's what our Imam needs of us. But I think acknowledging that that's difficult. Again, I'm going to draw on this idea of that discomfort by change, but knowing that that's what we need to seek to. And I think finally, probably, you know, the other area would be about our multi-faith families. You know, we've seen these grow exponentially within the Jamaat, and that requires us to be more inclusive. That requires us to think about what does that family look like? You know, the extended family is what we need to think about when we think about one Jamaat. So actually our one Jamaat should be our extended Jamaat. So anyone joining really feels part of that one Jamaat.
Exactly, yeah.
And maybe we can just sort of, you know, reflect on what we think the implications of this current, you know, crisis are on this area. I mean, I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that.
Yes, I mean, but let me react first to some of the things you've touched on. simply to say that you should know that Maulana Hazrat Imam, in fact, is very seized of all of these things. Making sure that we get proper representation, that, it's not just gender, but gender is an important part of it, but make sure that other traditions are represented in our leadership teams, make sure that we have proper demographic representation, particularly in institutions like NCAB. I think if we fail to achieve all of that, and we have, then that's a failure of our leadership. And I count myself amongst those who probably didn't get as much done as we would have liked. And so this is really part of our continuing journey to make sure that we keep ourselves open to being challenged. And your voice and the voice of others, I think, are very important in holding us to account, in making sure that we are being inclusive and recognizing the strength that comes from diversity. You asked, what are the implications of this crisis looking forward? I think it's too early to tell, frankly, and there are too many people predicting too many different things. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would be mindful of three things, given where we are today. I think the first thing that I would be very mindful of is that this crisis has exposed the inequalities in our society, who we reward, what we value. And it's forced us to think about the shift that we have allowed to creep upon us as a society, from a market economy to a market society, where we let the markets decide what we value and who gets rewarded for what service. And I think this is a time when we all need to think about what that means for us as a community. I'm not just talking about UK or Europe or the Western world. I'm talking about us as a global community. This inequality that we have accepted so far, I think needs to be challenged, and it will be challenged, I think, as we move forward. The second factor that I would be mindful of, I'm conscious that I'm speaking to somebody from Google here, but we are clearly going to see more digitalization in our lives. I think that's bound to happen. But for a community where social interaction is so important, that could become a disempowering feature if we're not careful. And we've got to start thinking of ways in which we turn that over on its head, so that we use the new technology, the new digital world, as an empowering feature, rather than a source of disempowerment. And the third thing that I would be mindful of looking forward beyond this crisis is that, I think this pandemic has brought home to us the importance of strong civil society institutions. Clearly, governments will do what governments and only governments can do, public health and so on. The private sector will do what the private sector does best, innovation, R&D, and so on. But civil society institutions have an important role to play, and that's become very clear in the way we've all responded to this crisis. And it reinforces, I think, the wisdom of Maulana Hazrat Imam's focus on this area. People often say to me, why is Maulana Hazrat Imam so seized by this importance of civil society? And I think we now have proof, if proof was needed, that there is an important role for civil society institutions to play. And finally, of course, the world of work is going to change. We've talked about the sort of Google and Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus, and all of this is not the new army. This is just the advanced party. Our life is going to change. And again, from your vantage point from Google, I don't know whether you've got a perspective on what changes will accelerate or decelerate change in this area.
Well, you're right. Obviously, technology has certainly accelerated. And actually, I've been really humbled and impressed by how our institutions have embraced, technology and reached out to the Jamaat in a different medium than they've ever, done before. But we found, that, COVID has highlighted the need for even more inclusion during this time. So, the fact that we are not seeing people, we really have to be much more thoughtful about who we include. And if I think about the Jamaat Khana space, actually, we can't just go to Jamaat Khana and say, Yali Madat, and, have that contact just by nature of not having the physical space. And so, that has real implications, I think, for the more vulnerable. So, and I don't just mean, our seniors here. I'm thinking about people who are living alone and don't have, any family here. Parents with special needs who are now at home full time and carrying that incredible burden, where Jamaat Khana, would have been a space for respite, for them to, have others, meet their child and to get acknowledgement, and that's not happening. So I think that really sort of puts, again, onus on us as individuals to think about how we can be more inclusive without physical spaces, and how we lean in to make sure that actually all our Jamati members feel safe and feel included at this time. And, from my perspective, diversity matters more than ever before. So we talked earlier about the fact that, diversity leads to better innovation and creativity. And as so we think about the economy, as so we think about where, things are going to go, without innovation and creativity, companies, small businesses will find it difficult to survive. So I think it puts even more onus on making sure that there's diverse perspectives at the table for the future.
Agreed.
And maybe we look forward, to thinking about, let's say 2040, what do we think we need to do to ensure that, we are genuinely going to be living as one Jamaat in the future?
2040. Look, I think this goes back to the fundamentals. It's going back to, and you've heard me rant on about this before, but it goes back to my 3 attributes of what defines an Ismaili. Belonging, behavior, belief. And we have to find ways in that new future world of supporting people's desire to belong and to feel engaged. We have to promote and we have to protect our values and our behaviors. And as I keep saying, we have to keep the relevance of our faith alive in people's mind. I mean, that's the foundation. And so, I have to say, I don't think that any of that needs some grand design. I don't think it needs some brand new master plan. What it does need is protecting our pre-COVID traditional values in a post-COVID setting. I was talking to some young emerging leaders of our Jamaat a week ago, and I was reminding them of the example of Albert Einstein, who was teaching physics at Oxford University in 1942. And in that year, as he did every other year, he used to set exams for his physics classes. And after one such exam, as he was walking out through the campus with his assistant said to him, very meekly, not wishing to offend the professor, he said, Professor, I noticed that the exam that you've set to this group of students today is the same exam that you set to the same group of students last year. And Einstein, sort of without missing a beat, just carried on and said, yes, it's exactly the same questions. And the assistant then, again, not wishing to offend, said, but why? It's the same group of students. And Einstein said, yes, I set them the same questions because the answers have changed. And I think that's where we are today, that, the challenges that we face, the questions that we are confronting about one Jamaat, one community, solidarity, unity, the questions haven't changed and the questions won't change. But I think our response, our answers are going to need to change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as I think about our answers, we do need to think about how we move towards our Imam's vision in this. So, we've been talking today a lot about, diversity and inclusion and belonging, but actually our Imam talks about pluralism. He talks about how we need to learn this attitude that's not about eliminating difference or minimizing it. It's about embracing it, about us realizing that everybody has something to contribute and that we can all benefit from that. And I'm, recalling, last year, a speech he made where, he talked about the fact that, we need to learn to live and work with people that we don't particularly like. And that's the reality of life. But that takes concerted, deliberate efforts to build social institutions and cultural habits that take account of that difference. So seeing diversity as an opportunity rather than as a burden. And I think, we've seen there is no quick fix to this, and our Imam is telling us that this is difficult, but it is a journey that we must go on as a Jamaat. And I think here I just want to emphasize again that individual actions matter, that we can all play a role in owning this, and that continuously together we can, I think, get closer to our Imam's vision of one Jamaat and our pluralism.
Very good. Well, it's
Great.
been
So I think end of our conversation.
I've really
Did you have
enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it, and gives me an opportunity once again to thank you for all the great work that you're doing and the leadership that you bring. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's so lovely to connect with you again. And I'm going to leave us actually with a poem, if that's okay, I'd like to share, that I think particularly resonates during these times. It's The Children of Adam by Sadi.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. Thank you, and Yali Madat.
Yali Madat.
Yali Madat, my name is Naseem Nanji and I'm a laughter yoga leader. COVID-19 pandemic has created a lot of changes in our lives. This has created a lot of stress. Laughter yoga is known to reduce stress, anxiety, and even depression. Usually, laughter yoga is done in a group of 20, 30 people, and it's in a club. However, for this purpose, we are going to be doing it on our own at home. However, if you have family doing it with you, please, please adhere to the government guidelines of social distancing. I'm here to bring you a few tips on how you can bring more laughter into your lives, even when there is nothing or very little to laugh about. Simply because laughter is good for us. It lifts our mood, it lowers our stress. It helps to improve our health and well-being. And it helps to change our perspective so we more easily can cope with whatever challenges we are facing. All of the above is possible if you practice every day. Let's put a smile on our faces even if we don't like it. We can pretend, and that sometimes is easily done. So take a deep belly breath, deep belly breath. It starts from, the breath goes right down to your tummy. When you breathe out, separate your lips with a even if it's not real. It's okay. It's just natural, and body cannot tell the difference. The effect is the same. Laughter yoga was introduced by a medical doctor called Dr. Madan Kataria in India. Laughter yoga is practiced with exercises, routine, and deep breathing. So I will show you some of the routines that we do with laughter yoga. And it goes with clapping. You clap your hands palm to palm because these are pressure points which help also on the healing. So it's simple. Just go clap hands. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And then we add some words and we go ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. So you want to breathe in deeply and breathe out with your mouth wide open. Let's practice a few things. Oh, sometimes we celebrate, and we celebrate simply by going, very good, yeah, very good, yay. Okay, you guys ready? Start with a hi. Hi. Very good, yeah. Very good, yeah. Okay, so in our social distancing, there is very little hugging, and hugs are good for you too. So how about a self-hug? Start with your right hand, go all the way to your left shoulder and the other hand, and you go. Let's do that again. I. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Breathe in. Hold it, and right, we're going to make some milkshake now, okay? So you have powder in your hand and milk in the other hand. And you go, I. Another one. I. This time you can be cheeky and throw it across. Ready? I. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Breathe in. Hold it, and next thing, we're going to do some arm exercise, and it's going to go I. Very good, yay! Very good, yay! Okay, we're going to do a mobile laughter, seeing that we've got all mobiles. So here you are, you've got a mobile and you are talking to somebody. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Breathe in. Hold it, and breathe in. Hold it, and a lot of us have tablets to take. And sometimes it's not quite nice to have all of those tablets. So we're going to take those tablets with a laughter. Ready? White one, I. Pink one, I. Green one, I. Ready? Some more? Okay. White one, I. Pink one, I. Green one, I. Ready? Very good, yeah! Very good, yeah! Okay. Another hug? Of course. I. Well, we're going to do some appreciation of ourselves. And you're going to go, very good, yeah! Very good, yeah! Okay. There's so many household chores to be done in this period where we are all at home. So let's start this horrible all-style Hoover, which is very difficult to start sometimes. And it goes, ready? I, yay! Missed that corner. Very good, very good. Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah. Have you ever had to make a cup of tea for yourself and that kettle never seems to be boiling and you're standing there? Really frustrating. Ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Breathe in, hold it, and you can laugh without any reason, and it's unconditional, absolutely. So now we are going to do what is called a calming down exercise, okay? And we're just going to go ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, 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 ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Take a couple of small, regular breaths. Give yourself some time to relax. Remember, laughter yoga lifts mood, improves circulation, brings a very different perspective to life and the current situations. Practice with choice. Practice every day. Keep laughing. Have a good day.